This girl devoured countless heroes. To her, a first-year student like Leoplav should have been an easy meal. So when Leo calmly tells her that he will tear apart every Legion commander and even Erebus, she laughs at him. Then Leo attacks, one kick. That is all it takes to send the monster crashing into the ground. Silatuna tries to convince herself that he only won because she is injured. But when she looks into Leo's eyes, her confidence disappears. She has faced powerful heroes before. She has killed them. Yet now, her entire body is trembling before a single student. Leo slowly draws his sword. This time, I will not let a single one of you get away. The moment Silatuna feels his aura, her face turns pale. It really is you, Kyle. But Leo does not react. To him, she is nothing but worthless trash. How did an ordinary first-year cadet gain the power to make a monster like this beg in fear? To find out, we need to go back to where it all began. Leoplav was anything but an ordinary child. Beneath that youthful face lived the soul of a legendary hero reborn. A man who had roamed the earth 5 millennia ago, standing shoulder to shoulder with the greatest champions humanity had ever known. His new life began in the most innocent of ways. Listening to his mother read tales of those ancient heroes who once saved the world. But the moment he heard their names, his expression shifted. The story praised everyone except one. His former self, Kyle, had been completely erased from history. The realization struck him like a blade to the heart. How could someone who had accomplished so much simply vanish from every record? Unable to accept it, he resolved to uncover the truth behind his disappearance. Years passed, and Leo enrolled in a royal school, but nothing there could hold his interest. The lessons felt painfully elementary, and the students around him seemed far weaker than they should have been. It was only after returning home that the part he truly cared about began. The moment he stepped outside, a woman came hurtling toward him with terrifying force. The attack was sudden enough to catch him off guard, but Leo still managed to raise his sword and block the strike. Judging by their reactions, this wasn't their first encounter. Exchanges like this were practically routine between them. The woman looked delighted, saying she had been waiting for this rematch for a long time. She declared that this battle would serve as Leo's final examination before she allowed him to attend Lumina Academy. Then the truth became clear. The fearsome warrior standing before him was his own mother. Without hesitation, she launched another attack, and steel crashed against steel. Leo was already struggling to keep up, yet his mother casually mentioned that she wasn't even using a fraction of her true power. The duel continued relentlessly, each clash carrying more pressure than the last, but eventually the tide shifted. Through pure technique and overwhelming mastery of the sword, Leo slowly gained control of the battle. His skills surpassed expectations, and before long, he forced his mother into surrender. For a moment, she could only stare at him in amazement. After recovering, she asked him a simple question. Why was he so determined to enter Lumina Academy? Lumina Academy, the Academy of Human Heroes, was one of 4 prestigious institutions belonging to the world's major races. Each safeguarded pieces of the hero record, invaluable remnants of history. For Leo, that made the academy far more than just a school. Among all possible locations, he believed Lumina Academy was the place most likely to contain traces of Kyle's forgotten past. With a goal like that, there was no chance he would back down. His mother then informed him that members of the Zeringer clan had arrived in Dawn and would be staying at the Plav mansion. While she wasn't exactly thrilled about hosting them, she had a plan. She intended to speak with Zeiss Zeringer, the clan's vice-patriarch, and ask whether he would teach Leo the famous Zeringer aura technique. In her eyes, mastering that technique would give him enough strength to enter Lumina Academy next year. The problem was that Leo had no intention of waiting another year. He wanted in now. Sometime later, the scene shifts to the Plav mansion, where a young woman named Celia Zeringer arrived. Stepping from her carriage, she immediately questions why her uncle chose to stay somewhere like this. With the resources of the Zeringer clan, he could have rented an entire hotel without effort. Celia Zeringer, 15 years old, was widely known as the Sword Princess of the Zeringer clan. At the moment, her entire focus was fixed on the Lumina entrance examination, making her doubtful that a relatively minor family like the Plavs could contribute anything meaningful to her preparation. Just then, her uncle called out to her. The man was Zeiss Zeringer himself, vice-patriarch of the clan. With an amused smile, he asked whether she wasn't at least curious about meeting Leo, the boy who had boldly claimed he wasn't interested in the Zeringer clan. Celia barely reacted. If Leo couldn't even use aura yet, then as far as she was concerned, there wasn't much worth seeing. Zeiss disagreed completely. In fact, he seemed unusually interested in the boy's potential. After entering the mansion, Zeiss formally greeted Dade Plav, head of the household, along with his wife, Reina. Respect was exchanged on both sides as the hosts welcomed their guests. He then introduced Celia, who responded with flawless manners and thanked them for allowing her to stay. Reina took a closer look at the young girl and quickly noticed how much she resembled both her father and her uncle. Meanwhile, Celia observed Reina's black hair and crimson eyes. The resemblance was impossible to ignore. Almost immediately, she realized Reina was part of the Zeringer bloodline as well, making her Celia's aunt. Later, Zeiss and Reina sat together and caught up his brother and sister. During their conversation, Zeiss mentioned that they had recently visited the Royal School of Dawn in hopes of meeting Leo. Unfortunately, the boy had already left and apparently wasn't interested in seeing anyone. Reina apologized for her son's behavior, knowing it might have seemed rude. Curious, Zeiss asked what kind of person Leo truly was. Reina's answer came without hesitation. She described him as extraordinarily talented. That praise immediately made Zeiss wonder whether Leo was truly worthy of inheriting the Zeringer flame. Reina continued speaking highly of her son, but she made one thing clear: this wasn't blind parental pride. Leo genuinely possessed the talent and potential required to stand among the clan's finest. The statement only increased Zeiss' curiosity. While he trusted his sister's judgment, he decided he would evaluate the boy personally before reaching any conclusion. Elsewhere, Leo sat alone, quietly focusing. After completing a small ritual, he finally declared that his vessel was ready. At last, his body had reached the point where it could contain everything he needed. He then reflected on why he had delayed learning aura for so long. The issue was tied to the unique nature of his body. If he accepted aura too early, it would naturally shape and specialize itself around that power, which would greatly restrict his ability to gather mana and soul energy, both essential to his long-term ambition. His previous life had taught him a painful lesson about uncontrolled power. Back then, if he had fully mastered the abilities and essence left behind by his fallen companion, he never would have allowed a seed of disaster to remain. He refused to repeat that mistake. This time, he would achieve absolute control, and that journey began with aura, but he intended to master it his own way. Before he could continue thinking, a voice interrupted him. Turning around, he found himself face to face with Celia. Wearing a confident smirk, she remarked that he finally looked like someone taking training seriously. Though there was obvious sarcasm behind her words, she still offered to teach him swordsmanship if he was willing to learn. The problem was simple. Leo had absolutely no idea who she was, so Celia introduced herself properly, proudly declaring herself to be Celia Zeringer, the world-famous sword princess. With introductions complete, Leo wasted no time. While he appreciated the attention, he had no interest in receiving lessons from someone he considered less skilled than himself. The statement instantly irritated her. To Celia, it sounded like he was claiming superiority. Leo calmly clarified his position. In a real fight to the death, she would probably win because he couldn't use aura. But if the contest was limited to pure swordsmanship, he was completely confident he could handle her without much difficulty. That answer struck a nerve. Feeling challenged, Celia grabbed a sword from the nearby training weapon, intending to prove that Leo's confidence was nothing more than arrogant. Even if he learned aura someday, she couldn't imagine him surpassing her. This duel would teach him reality. Then she raised the stake. If she won during her week-long stay, Leo would become her servant. The threat barely earned a reaction. Instead, he simply asked what happened if he won. Celia answered immediately. If he emerged victorious, she would become his servant instead. With the wager established, Leo picked up a practice sword and entered the duel. His opening attack came far faster than Celia expected. Although she evaded it with ease, the speed alone caught her attention. For someone without aura, it was disturbingly impressive. Still, she remained convinced that speed alone wouldn't be enough. The two rushed forward again. This time Leo's strike crashed down with shocking force. The impact overwhelmed her, forcing her backward. The pressure was so immense that when his blade slammed into the ground, the practice sword shattered instantly. Yet Leo didn't stop. Without hesitation, he charged again. At this point, Celia's confidence was already beginning to crack. She knew she couldn't block what was coming. With no other option, she braced herself and prepared to take the hit head-on. Then something unexpected happened. She emerged completely unharmed. In the final instant, she had instinctively activated aura armor. The problem was obvious. This duel had been agreed upon as a contest of swordsmanship alone. Rather than admit she couldn't avoid the attack, Celia quickly dismissed it as nothing more than a reflex. Leo wasn't interested in excuses. As far as he was concerned, the match was already over. Naturally, Celia refused to accept that conclusion. Leo had anticipated exactly this reaction. So without another word, he removed the magical weight bracelets that had been suppressing his physical strength. Then he attacked again. The next strike didn't merely hit her defenses. It completely shattered her aura barrier, leaving the sword princess utterly stunned. Leo didn't stop after breaking her defenses. Instead, he pressed the advantage without the slightest bit of mercy, forcing Celia to experience the overwhelming difference in their abilities firsthand. Later, while wandering through the courtyard, Leo came across his mother. Standing beside her was a man she immediately introduced as his uncle, Zeiss. Leo respectfully lowered his head in greeting, and Zeiss returned the courtesy before introducing himself. The two exchanged a firm handshake, marking their first official meeting. His mother then casually asked whether he had already met Celia. The question instantly reminded Leo of how the proud sword princess had collapsed after their duel, overwhelmed by the shock and fear. Before he could explain, a knight arrived with a report regarding Celia's condition. The update caught Zeiss's attention immediately. Learning that Leo had defeated Celia, despite not possessing aura, left him genuinely impressed. He openly praised the achievement as remarkable. Leo, however, brushed aside the compliment, insisting that Celia had simply underestimated him. Zeiss asked what exactly had been wagered in their duel. Leo answered without hesitation. The loser was supposed to become the winner's servant, which meant that for the next week, Celia technically belonged to him as a maid. The idea clearly didn't sit well with Zeiss. Even so, he understood the importance of honoring promises. While he couldn't allow a member of the Zeringer direct bloodline to perform ordinary maid duty, he hoped Leo would agree to release her from the agreement. In return, he offered a reward he considered far more valuable. Leo rejected the proposal immediately. The wager had been made between him and Celia, nothing more. As long as she carried the Zeringer name, she was responsible for honoring her own word. Seeing that reasoning fail, Zeiss tried another angle. Would Leo really be willing to give up the chance to learn the Zeringer aura breathing method? Leo's answer came with a sharp edge. In his eyes, a technique offered merely to save someone from embarrassment wasn't worth learning in the first place. At that point, Zeiss decided to challenge him directly. After all, Leo had just implied that a direct descendant of the Zeringers would serve him and had effectively called the clan's treasured breathing technique worthless. Most children would have folded under that pressure. Leo didn't even blink. He calmly stated that everything Zeiss said was technically correct. Surprisingly, the vice-patriarch's attitude softened. Rather than becoming angry, he politely asked whether Leo understood how arrogant and disrespectful those words might sound. Once again, Leo made his position clear. He had never intended to insult the Zeringer. If the aura breathing method had been presented as a reward for defeating Celia, he would have accepted it without hesitation. What he refused to accept was a bribe designed to erase the consequences of her loss. From Leo's perspective, refusing to acknowledge Celia's defeat implied that everyone believed she was superior and had only lost due to bad luck. He rejected that idea completely. Even if Celia had fought him seriously from the beginning, the outcome would have remained exactly the same. Hearing such confidence only made his mother proud. As for Zeiss, the more he listened, the more fascinated he became. The boy's refusal wasn't driven by greed or ambition. He simply disliked the reasoning behind the offer. To Zeiss, that level of conviction was extraordinary. For a brief moment, he couldn't help wishing a child like Leo had been born into the Zeringer family. Finally, he turned toward his knights and instructed them to move Celia into the maid quarter. Then he granted Leo a special privilege, allowing him to address his uncle without formal honorific. After their conversation ended, Leo departed. Watching him leave, Zeiss confidently told his sister that once he returned home, he would do everything possible to convince the patriarch to allow Leo access to the clan's legendary technique, Phoenix Spray. The story then shifts to Leo's room. The first thing anyone would notice was Celia's expression. The once proud sword princess looked like she wanted the floor to swallow her whole. With visible embarrassment, she introduced herself as Celia, the maid assigned to serve Leo for the next week. Meanwhile, Leo was enjoying every second of it. What surprised him even more was how well the simple maid outfit suited her. Her usual noble appearance was gone, yet somehow she looked even more striking. Celia looked irritated by the compliment. As far as she was concerned, her beauty wasn't exactly breaking news. Leo quickly clarified that he wasn't trying to mock her. The habit came from someone he once knew, a man who praised beauty whenever he had the chance. That memory brought him back to a companion from his previous life, the dwarven master, Dweno. Leo remembered how the dwarf constantly claimed that true beauty surpassed eternity itself. If peace ever returned to the world, he wanted to spend the rest of his life sharing beautiful things with everyone he met. Their conversation shifted when Celia noticed the book Leo had been reading. Curious, she asked about it. Leo explained that it was a book he had enjoyed since childhood, a story known as The Great Hero of the Beginning. Celia immediately recognized it. She remembered reading the same book when she was only 5 years old. Seeing his interest, she walked to the bookshelf and picked out another volume. Mentioning that there were countless books written about Kyle, Leo responded thoughtfully. History, he explained, often oversimplifies achievement. Many legendary accomplishments attributed to a single hero may actually be the result of multiple heroes working together across time. In other words, he was subtly suggesting that Kyle's contributions had likely been credited to others. Celia wasn't convinced. According to popular belief, Kyle was nothing more than a fraud who tried to steal glory from genuine heroes, and she happened to share that opinion. Needless to say, hearing people reduce his former self to a scammer wasn't exactly pleasant for Leo. Rather than continue the discussion, he decided to move on. Breakfast came first, training came after. Instantly slipping into her maid role, Celia politely asked whether she could train alongside him. Outwardly, she looked respectful and obedient. Internally, she was fighting the urge to strangle him. Still, she endured it because she desperately wanted to uncover the secret behind his ridiculous strength. Leo accepted the request and headed toward the training ground. Sometime later, Celia could be seen kneeling on the floor. exhausted and gasping for air. After the session, Leo calmly analyzed her performance. Once her stamina began running low, her reaction slowed noticeably. Small gaps appeared between movements, and those openings created opportunities for opponents to exploit. The exact same thing was happening to her now. Celia wasn't convinced. To her, pushing the body to such extremes felt less like training and more like abuse. Leo disagreed completely. Compared to the heroes of the past, modern fighters had become too dependent on aura. Aura techniques had evolved dramatically, and as a result, physical conditioning had been neglected. But aura strengthened the body, and a stronger body amplified aura in return. The two worked together. Celia absolutely refused to be labeled weak. Driven by pure stubbornness, she forced herself back onto her feet. Before charging in again, she warned Leo not to underestimate her. Unfortunately, confidence alone wasn't enough. The moment she rushed forward, Leo casually swung his sword and launched her across the training ground. She crashed to the floor once more. At this stage, humiliation was beginning to pile up faster than she could recover from it. Then Leo suddenly handed her a bracelet. Without thinking much about it, Celia reached out and accepted the item. A terrible mistake. The bracelet was enchanted with weight magic. The instant it settled onto her body, its absurd heaviness became apparent. Meanwhile, Leo revealed a rather frightening smile. From now on, she would be training while wearing it. The following day, even Zeiss came to observe their training. Watching Celia struggle under the relentless regimen, he couldn't help but think this experience might be exactly what she needed. Before heading to Lumina Academy, having her pride shattered once or twice could do her some good. Then he called out to Leo and shared some exciting news. He was considering requesting permission from the Patriarch to allow Leo to inherit Phoenix Breath. The name immediately caught Leo's attention. As far as he remembered, Phoenix Breath was the foundational aura technique of the Zeringer family itself. Only individuals officially acknowledged by the clan could inherit it. Even Celia doubted her father would approve such a decision. Zeiss had already considered that possibility, which was why he presented a condition. If Leo successfully passed the Lumina entrance examination, he would be granted the opportunity to learn Phoenix Breath. The proposal instantly bothered Celia. In her eyes, Leo was still someone who couldn't even use aura. The entrance examination involved real combat. It wasn't a place for amateurs. Leo casually admitted that he lacked actual battle experience. Of course, that statement ignored an entire previous lifetime spent fighting wars and monsters. Zeiss waited for his answer. Leo agreed almost immediately, provided his parents approved. Time moved quickly. Before long, a full week had passed, and the day of the Lumina entrance examination finally arrived. The moment participants noticed Celia Zeringer among the applicants, excitement spread through the crowd. The famous sword princess had appeared in person. Meanwhile, Celia glanced toward Leo and asked whether he was nervous. Ironically, after spending an entire week acting as his maid, she was still calling him master out of pure habit. As they stood waiting, a familiar voice suddenly echoed nearby. Gulliver had arrived. His original goal was to meet Celia, but the moment he noticed Leo standing beside her, surprise flashed across his face. Naturally, he couldn't resist throwing a few insults. In his opinion, someone who couldn't even use aura had no business participating in the examination. At the same time, he attempted to greet Celia with polite enthusiasm. The result was devastating. Neither Leo nor Celia acknowledged his existence together. They ignored him so thoroughly that it was as if he wasn't even standing there. The poor guy awkwardly tried to recover the situation, reminding Celia that he was Gulliver Van Tratten and that they had already met before. Unfortunately for him, that only made things worse. Celia couldn't even remember his name. Before he could embarrass himself any further, she casually grabbed Leo's hand and started walking away, leaving Gulliver standing there in complete disbelief. Before they could get far, another voice called out to them. This time, it was a pair of siblings. The older of the two was a bad Llewellyn, 16 years old and a proud representative of the prestigious Llewellyn family. Beside him stood his younger sister, Chelsea Llewellyn, only 14 but carrying herself with the same confidence. Unlike Leo, Celia immediately recognized them. Seeing his confusion, she explained that the two belonged to the Llewellyn family, one of the heroic bloodlines of the Lord Ran Empire. Judging by her reaction, she clearly wasn't happy to see them. She quickly warned Leo that the siblings would be taking the examination as well, meaning they were direct competitors. Under no circumstances could they afford to lose to them. The thought of the Zeringer clan falling behind the Llewellyn family irritated her far more than it probably should have. Leo, meanwhile, couldn't care less. As far as he was concerned, that rivalry had nothing to do with it. He belonged to the Plough family, not the Zeringer. Even so, when the siblings greeted Celia, she politely returned the gesture. She also introduced Leo as a member of House Plough, a noble family from the Kingdom of Dawn. The moment Abad heard that Leo lacked any particularly prestigious title, his interest vanished. To him, Leo was insignificant. Without another word, the siblings turned around and walked away, confidently declaring that the top position in the examination would belong to them. Needless to say, Celia was already imagining the satisfaction of crushing them later. Just then, the atmosphere shifted. A figure stepped onto the examination platform, instantly drawing everyone's attention. The man introduced himself as Ali Zyron, a professor from Lumina Academy. The reaction was immediate. Celia's eyes widened in shock the moment she saw him. Leo, on the other hand, looked completely unimpressed, mostly because he had absolutely no idea who the man was. That ignorance visibly irritated Celia. She quickly explained that Ali Zyron was one of the individuals whose name had been recorded within the hero record itself, a list reserved for the recognized heroes of the current age. As Leo studied the professor more carefully, he noticed something unusual. An enormous amount of mana was concentrated within the man's left eye. Moments later, Professor Zyron began explaining the entrance examination. According to him, the test normally consisted of two major categories: one-on-one combat and monster subjugation, and applicants completed them separately. Ali immediately made it clear that he hated that format. To prove his point, he casually burned the paper containing the official examination structure. The conventional rules were gone in an instant. Then he produced a thick ancient book. Opening it slowly, he revealed the first chapter, Prologue, The Wild Forest. The moment those words appeared, a massive magic circle erupted beneath every student present. No one understood what was happening, but everyone quickly realized one thing. Ali Zyron had no patience for inefficiency. Rather than conduct multiple separate tests, he intended to merge everything into a single challenge and evaluate everyone at once. To understand the significance of this, it's important to know that the hero record is more than a collection of historical stories. Its true value lies in its ability to recreate the worlds experienced by past heroes. Within those worlds exist the memories, struggles, and experiences of legendary figures, allowing future generations to learn from them and potentially inherit their power. In simple terms, it was a training system built from the lives of heroes themselves, and now every applicant had been transported into one of those recreated worlds, the Wild Forest. After the transportation was complete, Professor Zyron announced their objective: survive, nothing more. Students could cooperate, betray each other, fight, hide, or form alliances. The method didn't matter, only survival did. Anyone wishing to quit simply needed to destroy the orb they had been given. That was the only rule. As Leo surveyed his surroundings, recognition immediately flashed through his mind. He knew this place. It appeared exactly as he remembered it. Long ago, this had been an elven forest before it eventually fell under the control of the witch queen Salatna. Meanwhile, many students remained unconcerned. Some even wanted to leave immediately, convinced that everything around them was merely an illusion. Leo strongly disagreed. Even if this world originated from someone's memories, the dangers inside it were very real. A careless mistake here could easily cost someone their life. Almost as if the world wanted to prove him right, danger arrived immediately. Leo sensed a presence. An instant later, an arrow slammed into the ground beside him with enough force to shatter the earth. Thankfully, he had already moved. Turning toward the source, he discovered the attacker was none other than Chelsea Llewellyn. Apparently, she had mistaken him for a member of the Zeringer clan, and had decided to eliminate him before he became a threat. Leo quickly clarified that he belonged to the Plav family. Chelsea wasn't buying. She had personally seen him standing beside Celia earlier. Convinced he was lying, she became even more aggressive. Without hesitation, she unleashed a spell known as Windside. The attack caught Leo's interest. The spell itself didn't exist during his previous life. Even so, after examining it briefly, he realized its fundamental principles weren't all that different. Meanwhile, Chelsea grew increasingly frustrated. No matter how threatening her attacks were, Leo remained completely calm. To shake him up, she poured even more power into her next assault. The result was disappointing. Leo casually cut through the attack with a single swing of his sword, causing the incoming blade of wind to collapse effortlessly. For the first time, uncertainty appeared on Chelsea's face. From what she could tell, he hadn't used aura at all. So how had he stopped her attack so easily? Leo made things worse by casually commenting that her magic was overly simplistic. Then, as if insulting her wasn't enough, he offered her an alliance. After all, survival awarded the highest score. As a mage, she should focus on lasting as long as possible instead of getting eliminated early. Chelsea immediately took offense. She wasn't some ordinary mage. She considered herself a battle mage. And after hearing him dismiss her attacks as simple, she became determined to crush him right there and prove him wrong. Channeling all of her strength, she unleashed a barrage of attack. Every single one missed. By the time the spells reached their target, Leo was no longer standing there. Even worse, she couldn't sense any mana nearby, making it impossible to track his position. Then, she suddenly saw him right in front of her, close enough to touch. His fist was already clenched. The story never explicitly shows whether that punch connected, but judging from Chelsea's reaction, it hardly mattered. The strength vanished from her legs, and her knees nearly gave out beneath her. That alone revealed who had won the exchange. Even then, Leo calmly reminded her that his alliance offer remained available if she reconsidered. Before her answer could be heard, the perspective shifted. Inside Lumina Academy, members of the faculty watched the examination unfold through magical screen. Many were excited. The competition was finally becoming interesting. Back in the forest, however, Chelsea quickly discovered that Leo wasn't nearly as kind as he appeared. Rather than receiving special treatment, she found herself tied tightly against a tree. The expression on Leo's face made it painfully obvious that he had a plan, and it wasn't one she was going to enjoy. To make matters worse, he built a small campfire nearby as night began settling over the forest. Slowly, the flames grew larger. Then, they started creeping toward Chelsea. Panic immediately set in. The situation became even worse when the fire reached her clothes. Leo calmly explained that everything could be avoided if she simply agreed to cooperate. Unfortunately, Chelsea was unbelievably stubborn. She flatly refused. The only person she intended to ally with was her brother. Attempting to escape, she tried casting wind magic. Nothing happened. Leo had already prepared a magic restricting skill specifically to prevent that. Although internally, he knew the technique wouldn't hold forever. His mana reserves weren't large enough to maintain it indefinitely. Eventually, Chelsea gave in slightly. She reasoned that she didn't need magic to escape. Leo had already anticipated that thought, which was exactly why he never took his eyes off her. The moment she considered trying something clever, he increased the fire even further. Now the flames genuinely began catching onto her. That finally broke her resolve. At last, Chelsea agreed to form an alliance, but Leo wasn't satisfied with words alone. He demanded an oath sworn upon her family name. Realizing she had no choice, Chelsea swore upon the honor of the Llewellyn family that she would cooperate. Only then did Leo untie her. As her weakened body tipped forward toward the flames, he caught her before she could fall. The scene then shifts back to the academy observers. The professors continued monitoring the participants carefully. So far, Ali Zyron remained unimpressed. None of the students had demonstrated the qualities he was looking for. In fact, he found it ridiculous that so many of them had immediately chosen to fight each other instead of focusing on survival. Among all the participants, only two groups had truly stood out. Celia Zeringer and Abad Llewellyn, who were working together effectively, and Leo alongside Chelsea. Ali paid particular attention to Leo. While the stunt involving the fire was undeniably immature, successfully forcing someone as capable as Chelsea Llewellyn into cooperation still impressed him. Especially because Leo lacked the overwhelming prestige and natural talent possessed by students like Celia and Abad, at least from Ali's perspective. What the professor didn't realize was just how wrong that assumption was. After clearing several monsters from their path, Leo and Chelsea continued deeper into the forest. By this point, Chelsea had started to realize that partnering with him might have been one of the smartest decisions she could have made. Curiosity eventually got the better of her. She asked what kind of aura he was using. The strange thing was that she couldn't sense any mana from it. Leo's answer nearly short-circuited her brain. He casually revealed that he didn't know how to use aura at all. The statement hit harder than any spell. Chelsea stared at him in disbelief. As they continued talking, neither of them noticed the creature lurking within the bushes nearby, at least not immediately. The hidden monster watched patiently, waiting for an opening. Chelsea spotted it first. Without hesitation, she unleashed a powerful attack. Honestly, the poor monster never stood a chance. The amount of force she used was complete overkill for a creature that weak. Even Leo admitted she possessed considerable power. The problem wasn't her strength, it was how she chose to use it. Before he could elaborate further, Leo suddenly sensed something unusual. His expression changed. Immediately, he ordered Chelsea to stop moving. The ground beneath him felt wrong. Kneeling down, he inspected the area more carefully and discovered dried earth, mixed with decaying corpses. That was all the confirmation he needed. A split second later, an explosion erupted. The trap had been triggered. Thankfully, Leo reacted instantly, grabbing Chelsea and leaping away before the blast could consume them. The people responsible for the ambush finally revealed themselves. None other than Gulliver and his companion. Considering Gulliver's grudge against Leo, the attack wasn't exactly surprising. Without wasting time, Gulliver ordered one of his lackeys to charge. The unfortunate volunteer obeyed immediately. It was a terrible decision. The moment he approached, Leo greeted him with a devastating punch that nearly shattered his jaw, sending him crashing to the ground in an instant. Leo stood there completely unfazed, radiating confidence, while calmly telling Chelsea to watch his back. For a brief moment, she froze. After all, this was the second time in a row he had saved her without breaking a sweat. Still, she quickly regained focus and moved into position behind him, preparing to confront the remaining attackers. As for Gulliver, the moment things stopped going his way, he did what he did best. He ran. Without a shred of loyalty, he abandoned his teammates and fled into the forest as fast as his leg could carry him. The only thing on his mind was finding someone strong enough to protect him. By pure coincidence, Celia happened to spot him from afar. Rather than pursuing him, she calmly continued walking in the direction he had come from. Eventually, both groups arrived at the same location. The sight waiting for them was unbelievable. Monster corpses littered the area, as did unconscious students who had failed to overcome them. Naturally, Chelsea immediately brightened upon reuniting with her brother. Meanwhile, Celia's attention shifted elsewhere, specifically toward Leo. With obvious suspicion, she demanded an explanation for why he was standing beside Chelsea. Leo answered proudly. Forming an alliance with her had been entirely his idea. Leo merely responded with a mysterious smile, claiming he had simply persuaded her that grin alone made Celia uncomfortable. The less she knew about how he accomplished that persuasion, the better. Afterward, Leo began helping the defeated students back onto their feet. The action immediately caught Abad's attention. He couldn't understand why Leo was helping potential rivals. Leo quickly explained his reasoning. Fighting each other was pointless. The real threat wasn't the other students, it was the world around them. Working together offered far greater odds of success than selfish competition ever could. Abad and the others looked confused. What challenge was he even talking about? In response, Leo directed their attention toward the nearby corpses. The dried remains immediately raised concern. One student noted that the bodies appeared completely drained of moisture. Leo agreed, but pointed out that the corpses weren't the only strange detail. Something else felt wrong. The forest had become unnaturally quiet. There were almost no monsters nearby. It was as though every creature in the area had fled from something far more terrifying, something powerful enough to dominate the entire ecosystem. The moment he said it, realization dawned on Abad. According to the stories, one of Hero Ali Zyron's greatest accomplishments involved defeating a high-ranking monster. Then it happened. A deafening roar echoed through the forest. The sound rolled through the trees like thunder. Something massive had awakened, and it was close. The creature had finally made its presence known. Elsewhere, Gulliver stumbled through the darkness alone. A torch trembled in his hand as fear consumed him. Despite his miserable situation, his obsession with revenge still occupied more of his thoughts than survival. Then he noticed a corpse lying nearby. Moments later, something hidden within the darkness caused him to tremble. When he looked up, his blood turned cold. A giant spider stood before him, and it looked hungry. At that moment, Gulliver's fate was practically sealed. Back outside the simulation, Professor Ali and the faculty continued observing the examination. The numbers were shocking. Over 500 students had already failed. The bigger problem was that the academy normally required at least 100 successful candidates. Only 50 remained. Most instructors would have lowered their standard. Ali had no intention of doing that. If fewer students qualified, then fewer students would pass. Simple. The headmaster had placed him in charge specifically because he was willing to prioritize quality over quantity. Ali believed true heroes revealed themselves during moments of crisis. And among all the candidates, one name had begun drawing his attention. Leo Plov, the unexpected dark horse. The question was whether this dark horse could survive what came next. Back within the examination, the remaining students hurried through the darkness. Visibility was poor. Navigating the forest had become increasingly difficult. Eventually Celia illuminated her sword, creating a crimson glow that cut through the darkness. That's when she saw it. The spider. Its horrifying form emerged from the shadows while feeding upon its prey. The sight alone sent chills through everyone present. Abad reacted immediately. Gathering mana, he prepared a powerful spell. But before he could release it, Leo stopped him. At the same time, he instructed Gulliver to break his crystal. The poor fool was practically being eaten alive, making resistance impossible. Desperate, Gulliver crushed the crystal. Electric energy erupted within the spider's mouth as the emergency activated. With preparations complete, Abad unleashed Windfang. The spell struck true. The monster was wounded but not defeated. As the dust settled, everyone finally grasped the level of danger standing before them. This wasn't an ordinary creature. It was the Spider Princess Tarantula, and she was an absolute nightmare. One reckless student charged forward, believing a direct attack would make a difference. He was humbled instantly. A single strike sent him flying across the battlefield. Next came Celia, confident as ever. She launched a crimson attack capable of piercing through most opponents. The beam struck the spider directly, causing visible damage and forcing it to recoil. For a brief moment, it seemed effective. Then the creature regenerated almost immediately. The wound disappeared as though it had never existed. Celia's attack had accomplished virtually nothing. Abad used the opportunity to point out the difference between a knight's power and a mage's destructive potential. Then he unleashed wrath. A violent spiral of wind tore into the spider from every direction. The attack looked devastating. Yet when it finally ended, the monster remained standing, completely alive and staring directly at it. For the first time, genuine fear crossed Abad's face. Chelsea immediately intervened. Using Windbreaker, she shielded her brother from the incoming counterattack. Even then, one of the spider's claws managed to slash him. Thanks to Chelsea's assistance, he escaped losing an arm by the narrowest margin. At this point, despair began creeping into everyone's heart. Every attack failed. Every wound regenerated. Nothing worked. Slowly, the Spider Princess advanced, preparing to finish them all. That was when Leo finally stepped forward. He revealed that this monster was the daughter of Salatna herself, a notorious beast that once served within Erebus's army. The same monster responsible for burning down the Elven Forest. As Leo spoke, another realization surfaced. The mana contained within Professor Ali's left eye carried traces of the Fairy King's power. Suddenly, everything started making sense. The tarantula had once ruled over the cursed wild forest. She didn't merely destroy the elves' homeland. She devoured one of the Fairy King's most trusted companions, a being who possessed an artifact known as the Ring of Life, an artifact containing seemingly endless life energy. Originally, Leo believed the hero Luna had defeated the creature. The truth was far different. The tarantula survived. By consuming the Fairy King's ally, she had gained access to that endless vitality, which explained her terrifying regeneration. Unfortunately, Abad remained stubborn. Since this monster was part of the examination, he believed it was his responsibility to defeat it personally. Celia felt exactly the same. Together, they launched attack after attack, trying to overwhelm the creature through sheer force. Leo could already see the outcome. It was pointless. The spider would continue regenerating endlessly, while they would eventually exhaust their mana, not the other way around. Finally realizing brute force wasn't working, Celia turned toward Leo and asked for his opinion. How were they supposed to kill this thing? Leo answered immediately. The solution required two people working together. The suggestion was met with immediate resistance. Abad still wanted the glory for himself. Celia wasn't much better. Both of them remained obsessed with proving their superiority. Watching their stubbornness, Leo finally lost patience. He bluntly pointed out the reality of their situation. If they continued acting like children instead of cooperating, every single one of them would fail. Those words finally landed. Abad reluctantly acknowledged that teamwork might actually be necessary. The problem was timing. A combined attack powerful enough to kill the monster would require preparation. Someone needed to buy them that opportunity, and none of the remaining students seemed capable of holding the creature back. That was when Leo stepped forward, calmly, confidently, and volunteered himself. He claimed he could stall the monster long enough for them to prepare the finishing blow. The statement immediately stunned everyone, especially Celia. From her perspective, Leo had completely lost his mind. After all, he still couldn't even use aura. Leo calmly estimated that in his current condition, he could keep the monster occupied for no more than 5 minutes. That answer didn't exactly inspire confidence. Abad immediately voiced his concern, worried that even with that much time, their combined attack might still fail. Leo wasn't worried in the slightest. With complete confidence, he picked up a weapon lying nearby and explained that fire and wind naturally complemented each other. If Celia and Abad combined their powers properly, it would be enough. For perhaps the first time, the proud sword princess and the arrogant genius mage agreed to fight toward the same goal. Meanwhile, Leo fixed his gaze on the monstrous spider. To everyone else, it was a nightmare. To him, it was something different. A challenge. A reminder of the world he once lived in. The battle began immediately. Before anyone could react, Leo rushed forward and severed one of the creature's limbs with a clean strike. The sight alone stunned Celia and Abad. Then he followed up by carving into the monster's face, showing absolutely no fear while confronting the terrifying creature. Seeing it again stirred old memory. Suddenly, the story flashes back to the distant past. An elven child sprinted through the forest in tears, desperately trying to escape. It was hopeless. Tarantula caught him with its webbing and wrapped him completely. The boy struggled. Nothing worked. Bound within the sticky prison, escape was impossible. Then the spider approached. Slowly, hungry, the child cried out for his mother, convinced his life was over. Just before despair consumed him, a radiant figure descended. A being of pure light, Luna. Fury burned within her heart as she witnessed the destruction of her homeland. The monster had already consumed the contractor who served as the Fairy King's trusted right hand. Without hesitation, Luna unleashed her power. Brilliant light enveloped Tarantula, trapping it in place before a devastating pillar of lightning descended from the heaven. At the time, even Luna hadn't expected Erebos's army to have completely overrun the elven forest. Meanwhile, Leo, in his previous life, as Kyle, rushed to free the trapped child and Tyurkii away the webbing that bound him. The memory faded. The present returned. Leo stood before the spider princess with an axe in hand. His role was simple. Buy time. Unfortunately, lacking aura limited what he could do. Turning toward Chelsea, he requested her assistance. He instructed her to attack him with elemental weapon. Naturally, the request sounded insane. Still, Chelsea followed his instructions. Leo effortlessly dodged the first attack. His movements were so absurdly fast that Chelsea began worrying he might eventually get caught by one of her spells. Leo dismissed the concern immediately. As long as she kept supplying weapons, he would be fine. Chelsea activated her magic. She prepared to create whatever weapon he needed. Leo didn't care what shape they took. As long as they could cut, they were useful. Moments later, she formed new weapons. Even before seeing them clearly, Leo correctly guessed their form. A scimitar. A bastard sword. Armed with both, he launched another relentless assault. Every swing tore through the spider's body. Whenever a weapon shattered, Chelsea immediately forged another. A dagger. A battle axe. Another blade, then another. The exchange continued non-stop. Watching Leo fight was honestly difficult to comprehend. Chelsea had never seen anyone wield so many different weapons so naturally. His physical ability alone bordered on the absurd. At this point, she was convinced she was watching a master martial artist. Even Abad couldn't deny Leo's strength anymore. Still, even Leo wasn't untouchable. A sudden strike managed to graze his face, leaving a shallow cut. The wound only strengthened his resolve. If he couldn't stop a spider here and now, his fallen companions would never let him hear the end of it in the afterlife. That thought alone pushed him forward. He intensified his assault and cut through the monster once again. Then he called out for another weapon. This time, however, Chelsea had bad news. She was completely out. No weapons remained. Even Leo looked surprised. Fortunately, they had already bought enough time. Behind them, Celia had finished preparing her strongest attack. The moment arrived. A massive spiral of roaring fire erupted forward and swallowed the spider whole. The inferno completely engulfed the creature. This time, there was no recovery, no regeneration, no survival. The spider princess was finally defeated. As its body collapsed, the ring of life emerged from within. The monster had been subjugated at last. Celia dropped to the ground in exhaustion. Relief washed over everyone. The nightmare was over. Yet despite everything, one thought kept replaying in her mind. Leo had actually held Tarantula back for 5 entire minutes. Without aura, without fear, without backing down. She wanted to acknowledge his achievement. Unfortunately for her, Chelsea was fast. The young mage had already become Leo's biggest support. In her eyes, what he had just accomplished belonged in the same category as the legendary heroes of old. Leo brushed off the praise as if it were nothing. Chelsea absolutely did not. The girl practically exploded with admiration. As someone aspiring to become a battle mage, she desperately wanted to learn from him. Ironically, Celia quietly supported the idea, mostly because she thought Chelsea deserved to experience the same brutal training she had suffered through. While they argued, Leo approached the Ring of Life. The artifact reacted immediately. A fairy materialized before him. Prince. Simply speaking, the fairy's name restored fragments of its lost memory. Afterward, the fairy returned to the ring and formally acknowledged Leo as the Fairy King. This unexpected outcome was only possible because Professor Ali had discovered the Eye of Manhwa. Soon afterward, a countdown echoed throughout the testing ground. The stage had been cleared. Their reward was officially recognized as the Fairy King's pledge. As the transfer process began, Leo caught sight of someone connected to his previous life. The moment passed quickly. Then the scene shifted. Far away, Colleen Badian, the Academy's headmaster, reviewed the examination results from the Western Territory. His assistant couldn't help wondering how many students Ali had actually allowed to pass. Given the professor's impossible standards, expectations were low. To their surprise, 40 students had successfully cleared the examination. The number was still small, but considering Ali's involvement, it was practically a miracle. The headmaster admitted he had expected 10 survivors at most. 40 was a remarkable outcome. Naturally, everyone assumed the top performers would be Celia Zeringer or Abad Llewellyn. Then another report arrived. Apparently, Ali had personally recommended one student as the representative of the year. The revelation stunned everyone. Ali almost never recommended anyone. Surely it had to be Celia or Abad. Instead, the report revealed a completely unexpected name. A student who had outperformed both of them. Leo Plus. Back on Ali's side, the professor continued evaluating the boy. In his official assessment, he recommended Leo as the representative of the Night Division. Even the headmaster was shocked. For Ali to praise a student so highly was nearly unheard of. More astonishingly, the professor described Leo as someone possessing the talent of a true hero. With the examination finally concluded, Leo found himself relaxing alone inside a steaming sauna. For the first time in a while, he could simply enjoy the warmth. His reward for clearing the hero world was the Fairy King's pledge. Normally, hero worlds didn't hand out reward, yet somehow he had become an exception. The reason remained a mystery. As he pondered it, his mother appeared before him. Without warning, she asked whether he knew why she had been expelled from the Zeringer clan. The answer lay in her past. While attempting to save an ally, she lost control and unleashed the Zeringer flame. Even now, she didn't regret her decision. Not for a second. Looking at her son, she expressed a single wish. She wanted his extraordinary talent to be guided down the right path. More importantly, she congratulated him on earning admission into the academy. Soon afterward, Leo arrived at the magnificent city of Lumeria. Students were instructed to collect their belongings before entering through the gate. Lumeria stood at the center of the world, and at its heart stood the legendary Lumina Academy. Leo had finally reached it. Waiting for him near the entrance was Zeiss. His uncle welcomed him warmly and congratulated him on passing the examination. Leo naturally wondered why he was there. Zeiss explained that the Zeringer clan was currently caught in an intense debate that had continued for over a month. He then tested Leo's intuition. Could he guess the subject? Leo immediately suspected it involved Phoenix Breath. Zeiss smiled. That was exactly the issue. Technically, Leo wasn't a direct member of the clan. His mother had already left the Zeringer, yet he was still her son. And after his performance during the notoriously difficult Western examination, many elders had become deeply interested in him. Then Zeiss presented him with a special subspace key. Leo activated it immediately. A hidden book appeared. Following his uncle's instructions, he stained its pages with his own blood. Biting his thumb, he allowed droplets to fall across the paper. The moment the blood touched the pages, the book accepted him. Its contents became accessible only to him. No one else could read its secret. Zeiss admitted that mastering the Ziringer techniques was far from easy. Even so, he had complete faith in Leo's talent. Finally, he formally welcomed him into the house of Ziringer. Later, Celia requested a private meeting. On his way there, an unexpected accident occurred. A girl suddenly collided with him. The impact sent both of them tumbling. Flustered, the bespectacled girl hurriedly gathered her scattered books while repeatedly apologizing for her carelessness. She rushed away before Leo could say much. Only afterward did he notice a card she had dropped. Picking it up, he discovered her identity. K.H. Lammuller, a first-year student at the academy. When Leo finally arrived at the meeting spot, he was greeted by an irritated Celia. She immediately complained that they still had plenty of shopping to do and that he was already late. Leo apologized and explained that he had unexpectedly run into his uncle. Curious, Celia eagerly asked what happened. Rather than answer directly, Leo raised his hand. A moment later, the flames of the Ziringer clan ignited. He casually asked whether he was using the technique correctly. Celia's mind practically stopped functioning. The impossible had happened. Leo had mastered the clan's secret technique in less than a month. The achievement was so absurd that she genuinely began questioning whether he was even human. Later that day, the Sword Princess and the Forgotten Hero watched a ship arrive at the harbor. A man introduced himself as Professor Alandu, instructor of the night class. He instructed the students to board immediately. Their journey toward Lumina Academy was finally beginning. As the ship sailed onward, the students relaxed and enjoyed the voyage. At one point, Leo and Celia stood together. Unfortunately, their appearance immediately gave the wrong impression. A confident young man approached and jokingly treated them like a couple. The comment instantly irritated Celia. The newcomer introduced himself as Thomas, an alchemist from the Kingdom of Mora. He was also a merchant, apparently willing to sell just about anything. Ever the businessman, he immediately offered his services in case they needed supplies at the academy. Leo introduced himself in return and explained that he came from the Kingdom of Dawn. The revelation caught Thomas off guard. After all, the Kingdom of Dawn was famous for tackling the notoriously difficult Western examination. His attention drifted toward their instructor instead. And then, without warning, the ocean exploded. The entire ship lurched violently as a gigantic tentacle erupted from the sea. The massive appendage crashed onto the deck and nearly flattened Thomas on the spot. Panic spread instantly. Students began shouting for their instructor to intervene. Meanwhile, the man casually sipped his wine. Not only did he refuse to help, he openly mocked them for expecting it. Students of Lumina Academy weren't supposed to wait for rescue. Heroes were expected to perform under pressure. If danger appeared, they dealt with it themselves. This was simply another test, and the challenge standing before them was an absolute nightmare. A colossal kraken emerged from the ocean depths and stared down at the freshmen. While others panicked, Leo remained calm. The Forgotten Hero stepped forward and sliced through one of the monster's tentacles without hesitation. Celia wasn't struggling either. The Sword Princess unleashed a blazing strike that scorched the creature. The kraken immediately retaliated. A violent blast of water drenched her from head to toe. Elsewhere, Thomas wasn't having nearly as much success. The creature grabbed him and lifted him into the air, while he screamed loud enough for everyone to hear. Seeing the situation, both Leo and Celia rushed forward at full speed. Their attacks landed almost simultaneously. Watching them fight left Thomas stunned. Celia's strength wasn't surprising. Her reputation spoke for itself, but seeing another freshman matching her intensity was something he never expected. His amazement didn't last long. A frozen tentacle suddenly crashed nearby and nearly crushed him. Naturally, Thomas immediately started yelling at whoever had almost killed him. The culprit turned out to be K.H. Lowe, the glasses-wearing girl Leo had bumped into earlier. While controlling powerful ice magic, she was helping hold the monster back almost single-handedly. She didn't hesitate to criticize Thomas either. From her perspective, he was contributing more noise than value. Thomas fired back immediately. In his eyes, talented people like her never cared about weaker individuals trying to help. As the battle continued, another tentacle shattered. Then familiar faces arrived. Abad and Chelsea entered the fight. Despite joining forces against the Kraken, the rivalry between their clan and the Ziringers clearly wasn't going anywhere. Even so, Chelsea's attention kept drifting toward Leo. Apparently, being enemies hadn't stopped her from becoming his admirer. Meanwhile, countless sea monsters continued surrounding the vessel on its journey toward the academy. Watching the chaos unfold, the instructor looked completely satisfied. To him, this was the perfect welcome party for the incoming freshmen. Wine still in hand, he evaluated the strongest performer. Celia, Abad, K.H. Lowe, Walden, and Dern Moira. The regional captains were performing exceptionally well, yet there was one student who stood apart from all of them. Someone who didn't dominate any specific region. Someone almost nobody knew. Liu Pla. His swordsmanship bordered on perfection. Even more frightening was his ability to react. It almost looked as if he could predict attacks before they happened. The instructor couldn't help smiling. Teaching a student like that was going to be interesting. Eventually, even Thomas exhausted his stockpile of potions. Thankfully, the academy finally came into view. The moment they disembarked, their instructor offered one final piece of advice. They should get used to fighting monsters. At Lumina Academy, encounters like this were only the beginning. Soon afterward, the freshmen entered the academy's grand entrance hall. The scale was breathtaking. The training grounds alone were unlike anything most of them had ever seen. Crowds gathered nearby, eager to see what this year's freshmen could offer. The entrance ceremony was about to begin. Students of the Night Division assembled under their instructor's guidance. Regional captains were ordered to stand at the front. Then the academy's headmaster took the stage. Callan addressed the incoming students with the authority expected of one of the world's greatest heroes. He reminded them that becoming strong required sacrifice. Heroes constantly risked their lives. Heroes surpassed their limit. Heroes pushed forward when others gave. Slamming his fist into the ground, he bluntly declared that anyone unwilling to do those things had no place at Lumina Academy. The speech was intimidating enough to silence the entire crowd. Then almost immediately, the terrifying atmosphere vanished. The headmaster suddenly transformed into a friendly old man, acting as though he hadn't scared everyone half to death moments earlier. Completely oblivious, he wondered why everyone had become so quiet. Bit by bit, his image as the legendary swordmaster continued to crumble. The next segment of the ceremony involved introducing the freshman representative. Excitement spread through the crowd. Many expected Celia, others assumed Abad, some even considered K.H. Lowe. Then the announcement came. Leo Pla. The name echoed across the venue. Even Leo looked surprised. Turning toward his professor, he quickly realized who was responsible. Ali had clearly recommended him. With no choice but to accept, Leo stepped onto the podium and addressed the professor. The audience whispers immediately spread. Most students had never heard of him. Nobody understood why an unknown freshman had been chosen over the academy's most famous candidate. Eventually, the speech reached its conclusion. Then came the question. As this year's representative, what goal did he have? Leo immediately understood the trap. The purpose wasn't to hear his aspiration. It was to provoke everyone standing behind him. At first, his response sounded perfectly polite and professional. Several instructors even nodded in approval. Everything appeared headed toward a peaceful conclusion. Then Leo detonated a bombshell. Without hesitation, he openly declared that he welcomed any challenger who wanted his position. Anyone at any time. The announcement instantly ignited the crowd. Students who had been quietly enduring the ceremony suddenly felt challenged. Some were furious, others were excited. Leo couldn't have cared less. If someone wanted his spot, they were free to try taking it. After the ceremony ended, students headed toward their dormitory. Starting tomorrow, they would enter a one-week exploratory period. During that time, freshmen could freely attend different classes before deciding which 3 subjects they wished to specialize in. The academy encouraged everyone to rest well. Nobody wanted to be late on the very first day. By coincidence, Leo's room ended up next to Thomas's. The alchemist excitedly talked about tomorrow's classes before eventually wishing him good night. Leo returned the greeting and collapsed onto his bed. As sleep approached, his thoughts wandered. He had finally entered the greatest academy in the world. Now came the real challenge. Finding traces of his lost hero record. The following morning, Leo sat quietly in the cafeteria enjoying breakfast. Thomas immediately requested permission to sit with him. Leo didn't care enough to refuse. Unfortunately, peace wasn't on the menu. An irritated student soon approached their table. Leo didn't recognize him. The newcomer introduced himself as Duran, captain of the Central Region. He had come for one reason, to confirm whether Leo truly meant the challenge he issued during the ceremony. Leo calmly acknowledged that his speech had been intentionally provocative. After all, he had practically invited strangers to challenge him. Duran didn't appreciate the casual attitude. Convinced of his own superiority, he expected respect. Instead, Leo continued drinking fruit juice as if nothing important was happening. That reaction pushed Duran over the edge. In a burst of anger, he launched a powerful kick that sent the table flying. What happened next left everyone speechless. Before the food could hit the floor, Leo moved. His speed was absurd. By the time everything settled, he had already reorganized the ingredients and reconstructed his cheeseburger perfectly. The man literally salvaged lunch in the middle of an attack. Leo casually commented that he simply couldn't allow perfectly good food to go to waste. Duran looked ready to commit murder. Every word coming out of Leo's mouth only made things worse. In Duran's mind, the freshman representative wasn't worthy of standing above him. Then their instructor appeared. Without warning, he casually draped an arm around each student. The smile on his face was friendly. The message wasn't. He politely reminded them of their positions as representative and regional captain. Then he asked whether they were prepared to accept punishment for starting a fight on the first day. The expressions on both students immediately changed. Neither wanted that outcome. Sometime later, the first exploratory class of the night division began. One detail immediately caught Celia's attention. Leo was nowhere to be found. For reasons she didn't fully understand, she found herself worried. Eventually, he arrived completely exhausted. His appearance was rough enough to make Celia suspect he had already been fighting someone. Leo chose not to explain. The class was beginning. Their instructor introduced himself and started the lesson. Thomas quickly noticed the tension between Duran and Leo while the professor explained the three major forms of power derived from mana: magic energy, soul energy, and aura. Among the three, aura was considered the most difficult to master. Celia confidently explained why. Unlike the others, aura required mana to lose its natural fluidity during the conversion process. The instructor praised her answer. Magic and soul energy utilized mana in its natural form. Aura was different. It absorbed mana and transformed it into a force suited for strengthening the body. To demonstrate, he released aura before the class. Then he asked a question. Did anyone know what allowed aura to function once it had been processed? The room fell silent. Even Celia couldn't produce a complete answer. Then Leo spoke. According to him, aura required mana to be burned. The instructor immediately confirmed he was correct, but Leo didn't stop there. When asked about the most important factor in that process, he answered again, stamina. The instructor became visibly impressed. Had Leo studied aura before? No, he hadn't, which somehow made his answer even more unbelievable. A student with no formal aura education had accurately explained its fundamental principles. Satisfied with the theory lesson, the instructor decided to move on. Using aura, he created a platform beneath his feet. Aura step, a technique that concentrated aura into the leg. Descending back to the ground, he explained that aura's applications were practically limitless. Around the training area, students began experimenting with the concept. Some practiced, others sparred. Meanwhile, Celia seized the opportunity to tease Leo. She generously offered to teach him aura step herself. There was only one condition: he had to call her sister. Leo wasn't interested. Understanding the principles was enough for him. The instructor then shifted attention toward Duran, specifically the cafeteria incident. Many students, including Chelsea, had no idea what had happened. Thomas eagerly made sure everyone became curious. Soon, both Leo and Duran were called forward. The instructor first asked Duran what had angered him so much. After hearing the answer, he came up with a solution. A simple one. The captain of the Central Region versus the freshman representative. The two would settle things through a race, and the winner would earn the right to lead the class. Professor A made the rules crystal clear. Both competitors were free to use aura however they wished. No restrictions, no limitations. On paper, that sounded like the perfect setup for Duran. After all, speed was his specialty, and the day of the competition arrived faster than expected. Naturally, Thomas saw a business opportunity. The self-proclaimed merchant genius immediately opened a betting pool, happily collecting wagers from students eager to make a profit. The first contender needed no introduction. Duran Moira, pride of House Moira, master of lightning aura, captain of the Central Region. Standing opposite him was a student nobody could properly explain. A dark horse with no famous title attached to his name. The mysterious freshman representative, Leo Pla. Expectations couldn't have been more divided. Many students had already convinced themselves that Leo's position was undeserved. After all, he couldn't even perform a basic aura step. Meanwhile, Duran was widely considered the fastest first-year student. To most spectators, the results seemed obvious. Professor I stepped forward and announced the final condition. The first person to cross the finish line would be declared the winner, and the loser would be required to accept the outcome without complaint. The atmosphere tightened. The race was about to begin. Even Celia had her doubts. Duran specialized in speed. His lightning aura was notorious for a reason. Under normal circumstances, beating him in a race sounded impossible. Yet despite every logical argument, a small part of her still expected Leo to do something ridiculous, something only Leo would attempt. The signal was given. The race began. The moment Professor A shouted the start, Duran exploded forward. Lightning aura wrapped around his body as he accelerated with terrifying speed. The gap appeared instantly. Meanwhile, Leo remained calm. The trash talk coming from the crowd didn't even earn a reaction. As expected, Duran surged ahead. The captain of the Central Region looked completely untouchable. Leo, on the other hand, seemed to be falling behind at first. Then he began channeling a small amount of aura into his feet. The audience immediately started talking. Some openly accused him of somehow cheating his way into becoming representative. Others mocked him outright. Among a sea of criticism, only one voice stood out. Chelsea. The battle maid shouted encouragement at the top of her lungs, completely unbothered by everyone else's opinion. Ahead of them, Duran continued proving why his family was feared. He really was as fast as lightning. Watching him reach the halfway point in an absurd amount of time lapse, Carr growing increasingly nervous. If things continued like this, Leo was going to lose. Then Leo did something nobody expected. Instead of speeding up, he slowed down. The crowd blinked. Had he given up? His momentum vanished completely. Then things got even weirder. Leo left the track completely. He ran toward the edge and started heading for the surrounding structure. Even Celia couldn't make sense of it. She believed in him, but this looked insane. To everyone watching, he had officially lost his mind. Meanwhile, Leo focused entirely on one thing: increasing the density of the aura concentrated in his feet. His body launched into a series of impossible jumps. He crossed the grass, vaulted over obstacles, then leaped directly into the spectator stand. The audience stared in complete confusion. Leo calmly turned and watched Duran continue racing ahead. The distance between them grew larger, but Leo wasn't worried. The aura beneath his feet continued compressing, growing denser, heavier, hotter, until finally the pressure reached its limit. The stands beneath him cracked and Leo jumped. One explosive leap. That was all it took. The force was so overwhelming that a miniature explosion erupted where he had been standing. The blast alone distracted Duran. Then something shot out of the smoke, a blazing red streak of meteor. Leo launched across the track with absurd momentum, cutting through the remaining distance in an instant. As he flew past Duran, he couldn't resist taking a jab. The forgotten hero casually mocked the speed specialist by calling him slow. Then he vanished ahead. Moments later, Leo crossed the finish line. His landing was smooth, effortless, almost elegant. Several meters behind him, Duran could only stare. His lightning aura had already faded. The result was undeniable. He had lost. Leo simply looked back and smiled. Victory secured. Granted, part of the arena was now damaged beyond recognition. But from his perspective, it was absolutely worth it. The crowd stood frozen. Only seconds earlier, they had been criticizing him. Now they didn't know what to think. Everyone knew Duran was considered the fastest among the freshmen. Yet he had been beaten. Not by another aura prodigy. Not by some noble genius. But by a boy who technically hadn't even mastered aura yet. Among all the spectators, only a handful truly understood what had happened. Celia was one of them. That wasn't an aura stat. What Leo had displayed was something far more advanced. The Phoenix stat. Back near the finish line, Carr and Chelsea nearly exploded with excitement. Their friend had actually done it. Professor A meanwhile quietly analyzed the race. Duran had used lightning aura exactly as expected. His speed increase was impressive, but Leo had approached the challenge differently. Instead of improving his overall speed, he focused every ounce of fire aura into a single movement. One perfect step. One flawless application. A simple concept executed at an absurd level. After catching his breath, Leo walked over to Duran and extended his hand. He congratulated him on the race, and even admitted that a longer course might have produced a different result. Duran wasn't interested. Still bitter over the loss, he ignored the handshake and brushed past it. Professor A watched the interaction carefully. For the first time in a long while, he felt genuine excitement. Among this generation, a hero worthy of the title might actually emerge. The moment Leo returned to his friends, Chelsea bombarded him with praise. According to her, he was the coolest person alive. She immediately demanded more training. Carr couldn't help asking why Chelsea seemed completely obsessed with Leo instead of appreciating it. The answer was painfully obvious to everyone else. Once class ended, Carr invited everyone to a cafe and even offered to pay. Leo declined. Without another word, he quietly separated from the group. Naturally, they wanted to know where he was going. His answer confused all of them. A summoning class? The reaction was immediate. Why would a Night Division student attend a summoning lecture? As always, Leo had his reason. Research. There was still one mystery he hadn't solved. The Fairy King's pledge. As far as he understood, rewards from a hero world were always connected to the world owner's power. That was the problem. Ali Zyron was a pure magician, not a summoner. If the reward followed the normal rule, Leo should have received something related to magic. Instead, the reward seemed deeply connected to summoning. Even stranger, interacting with fairies normally required access to fairyland. At the moment, the reward felt almost unusable. While waiting outside the summoning class, a familiar voice approached him. The speaker turned out to be Chanzia, captain of the Eastern region, top scorer of her territory. Unlike certain regional captains, she was surprisingly approachable, polite, friendly, easy to talk to. After exchanging greetings, she insisted he call her Zia, since she already knew he belonged to the Night Division. Finding him outside a summoning class was unexpected. Leo explained that his interest was more closely related to spiritualism. That answer immediately brightened her mood. If that was the case, they would probably encounter each other in many future classes. The conversation naturally shifted towards spirit contract. When asked about her spirit, Zia summoned a beautiful water sprite. The creature appeared effortlessly at her side. Leo admitted he hadn't formed a contract with any spirit yet. As kind as ever, Zia immediately offered her help. If he ever needed assistance learning spirit summoning, she would gladly support him. Leo had no intention of refusing useful connection. Then he made a dangerous mistake. He asked her aid. Zia smiled. 17. She also pointed out that Leo was only 15. Internally, Leo couldn't help thinking she looked much younger. Honestly, she appeared younger than Chelsea. The brief pause didn't escape Zia's notice. Immediately, she asked whether he was thinking something rude. Leo denied everything. A survival instinct every man understands. Eventually, Zia revealed the real reason she approached him. She had watched the race against Duran. The image of Leo streaking across the arena like a blazing comet had remained stuck in her mind ever since. Inspired by what she saw, she challenged him. One day somewhere, the two of them would compete. Leo found the request amusing. Naturally, he accepted. After dealing with so many eccentric personalities, meeting someone relatively normal was refreshing. Soon afterward, the exploratory summoning class officially began. And right away, things felt different. For starters, there wasn't even a classroom. The students were gathered outside in an open field. Several notable figures were already present. Leo scanned the area and immediately noticed how few students had attended. Honestly, it wasn't surprising. Summoning had never been a popular field. As he wondered why the lesson was being held outdoors, the answer arrived from above. A massive shadow swallowed the sunlight. Students looked up, then panic spread. A gigantic winged creature flew overhead. Its scaled body blocked out the sky. Moments later, it descended. The beast landed with enough force to shake the ground beneath them. A black wyvern. The sight alone caused several students to nearly collapse. Some lost all strength in their leg. Others forgot how to breathe. Then a woman jumped down from the creature's back. Smiling confidently, she remarked that her wyvern seemed quite fond of the class. The woman introduced herself. Yura Marin, their summoning instructor for the entire academic year. The reaction from the male students was immediate. Long white hair, athletic physique, striking features. A dangerous charm that drew attention without effort. Half the class looked ready to become her summoned creatures on the spot. Seeing her reminded Leo of Dwenna. If the dwarf had been here, he would have completely lost his mind. Unlike Luna or Lucas, Yura possessed an entirely different kind of beauty. The sort that would have inspired an endless amount of artistic research. Ignoring the students' internal chaos, Yura got straight to business. She addressed the freshmen as her little hatchlings and explained that anyone accepted into this prestigious program must possess at least some talent for summoning. Now it was time to find out exactly how much. The freshmen answered with confidence. Miss Yura seemed pleased by the energy in their voices. Good. That meant there was no reason to waste time. They would be moving straight into practical training. Without delay, she called for Carlo, the first-year associate professor of the summoning department, and instructed him to bring out the griffin. The moment the creatures appeared, excitement spread through the students. Yura explained the plan. Everyone would ride in pairs. There were enough griffins for every student. Simple. The problem was that almost none of them had ever ridden a griffin before. The moment someone voiced concern, Yura's expression darkened. The temperature around the group seemed to drop. She bluntly asked whether they intended to listen to her lesson or not. Then, without waiting for an answer, she climbed onto her black wyvern. Her message was clear. Anyone who thought riding a griffin was too difficult was free to quit and head home. The wyvern seemed to agree. It unleashed a deafening roar and spread its massive wings, instantly reminding everyone who was in charge. A moment later, both rider and beast shot into the sky. The display was enough to silence the entire class. Well, almost everyone. One student remained completely unshaken. Leo, associate professor. Carlo chuckled and encouraged the students to hurry after their instructor. Eventually, fear gave way to action. As students mounted the griffins, most quickly discovered that the creatures were far gentler than expected. Of course, not every griffin was cooperative. Some had personalities that could only be described as troublesome. Getting paired with one of those was simply bad luck. For the exercise, Leo partnered with Z. She politely asked if she could handle the rein. Leo had no objection and left the task to her. Soon, pairs of students began taking to the sky. One after another, the griffins lifted off. Those who adapted quickly managed to keep pace with the instructors as they soared over the sea. For many students, the experience was surreal. They hadn't expected to ride griffins on the very first day. As expected from Lumina Academy, the training methods were on a completely different level. Before long, most of the students had forgotten their earlier worry. Some were even arguing over who deserved to control the rein. Meanwhile, Zia guided their griffins smoothly through the air. She remained cautious despite their good progress. Fortunately, the griffin they received was unusually gentle. Even so, she knew better than to get careless. For inexperienced riders, griffins could become difficult at any moment, and that's exactly what happened. Seeing everyone become comfortable, Miss Yura decided it was time to make things interesting. She pulled out a whistle, then she blew into it. No audible sound reached the students, but the griffins heard it. Immediately something primal awakened within them. The creatures became restless, then chaotic. Within seconds, the skies turned into complete disorder. Students panicked as their mounts started acting wildly. Many instinctively looked toward their instructor for help. Ironically, she was the one responsible. Yura simply watched. In her eyes, anyone incapable of handling a misbehaving griffin had no business calling. themselves a Lumina Academy student. Even Zia struggled. Despite being an experienced summoner, controlling their griffin became increasingly difficult. As she wrestled with the reins, Leo reached forward. One hand steadied her waist, the other guided hers. He calmly explained that griffins were proud creatures. Trying to dominate them through force would only make them rebel harder. His movements were precise, subtle. Instead of fighting the griffin, he worked with it. Gradually, the creature responded. The chaos disappeared. Then Leo took control from behind. The griffin surged forward, faster, smoother, more controlled than ever. To everyone's surprise, they eventually flew past both Yura and Carlo. Even Miss Yura couldn't help being impressed. She immediately asked Carlo whether the freshman representative belonged to the night division. The records confirmed it. That only made Leo more interesting. His handling of the griffin was so natural that she almost assumed he had grown up riding one. Yet according to the records, he wasn't from a wealthy household, capable of owning such a creature, which meant only one thing: talent, pure talent. Eventually, all the students reached their destination, the island of Summon, the primary training grounds for summoners. The landing wasn't graceful. Many students staggered off their griffins and immediately started throwing up on the beach. The flight had been far rougher than expected. Leo, meanwhile, was doing something entirely different. He wandered along the shoreline searching for a specific fruit. Eventually, he found one with the perfect size and ripeness. As he reached for it, something else caught his attention: a burnt feather. The sight immediately triggered a chain of thought, but for now, he kept them to himself. After picking the fruit, he offered it to the griffin as thanks for carrying them safely. Only then did he return to the others. Once everyone had gathered, Miss Yura revealed the next surprise: an examination. On the first day, the announcement hit the students like a truck. Many of them had only come to sample the exploratory class. Now they were being tested. Yura remained unapologetic. Compared to other paths, summoners walked a far more demanding road. Everyone already knew that. Controlling mana alone wasn't enough. To form contracts, one needed spiritual affinity. To command summons properly, one needed taming ability. The profession required countless skills, which was exactly why summoner heroes were so rare. Yet those who reached the top often left greater marks on history than most traditional heroes. That possibility, that potential, that was the true allure of summoning. Every student present dreamed of becoming one of those legends. One student stepped forward: Eliza Han, a member of the prestigious Hergen clan, famous for producing summoner heroes. She asked the obvious question: what exactly was the examination? Yura smiled. The answer was simple. The island of summons was filled with beasts and spirits. Since summons served as a summoner's primary weapon, the test would evaluate each student's taming ability. Their objective was straightforward: enter the forest, tame a summon, bring it back. Better yet, any summon they successfully contracted would become theirs permanently. The students practically exploded with excitement. Opportunities like this didn't come off. Within moments, most of them charged into the forest, eager to find their future companion. Leo was one of the few who entered calmly. Interestingly enough, Eliza followed him. Word of his victory over Duran had already spread throughout the academy. Seeing him in a summoning class piqued her curiosity. She struck up a conversation. Other talented students immediately noticed the interaction. Leo, however, responded casually and brushed off her compliment. He claimed he was simply doing his best. The dismissal irritated Eliza more than she expected. Most people would have been thrilled to receive attention from someone like her. Observing from afar, Miss Yura quietly noted the students who stood out. The future leaders of her class were already revealing themselves. As time passed, many students successfully began taming creatures. Yet none of those summons interested Leo, not even slightly. Some students eventually noticed something unusual. The freshman representative kept moving deeper into the forest, far deeper than anyone else. Predictably, a few people started hoping for his failure. Maybe he wouldn't find a summon. Maybe he'd receive a 0. Maybe he'd run back to the night division where he belonged. Leo couldn't have cared less. Ignoring the noise, he continued following a trail. His guide was the feather he had discovered earlier. Moments ago, the feather's tip had been burned black. Now it had completely restored itself. That alone was enough to confirm his suspicion. Eventually, he reached a secluded clearing. After making sure nobody was nearby, he summoned the flames of the Ziringer clan. The feather was reduced to ashes instantly. An overwhelming heat erupted. Behind him, the kind of heat that seemed capable of burning the world itself. Back in his hometown, life had become quieter after Leo left. Reina spent her day preparing food outdoors, creating meals worthy of a fantasy movie. Yet despite the peaceful atmosphere, she couldn't stop worrying. It was only her son's first day at school. Surely she was overthinking things, right? If she could see what Leo was currently facing, she would realize her concern was completely justified. Trying to reassure herself, she reminded herself that Leo was strong. Meanwhile, that very boy stood surrounded by flames powerful enough to melt reason itself. The source of the inferno was one of the 3 great summons, the legendary Phoenix. The majestic creature stared at him with blazing eyes, Confusion flickered within its gaze. Why was a mere child wielding the flames of the Ziringer clan? The phoenix explained that it had only appeared because it sensed Reina's flame. Hearing his mother's name immediately caught Leo's attention. Curious, he asked how the legendary summon knew her. Apparently the timing of their meeting was no coincidence. The phoenix knew Reina personally. More than that, it owed her a tremendous debt. The creature finally introduced itself. Phoenix, one of the three great mystical summons, the legendary phoenix. Out of respect for Reina's bloodline, Fina greeted Leo with equal respect. Leo returned the courtesy and asked about her connection to his mother. Fina revealed the story. Years ago, Reina had saved the life of Fina's summoner, a hero named Ellen Lunda. The name alone nearly made Leo jump. Ellen Lunda wasn't just anyone, she was a genuine hero. The incident occurred during a dungeon expedition in Siren. Ellen had lost every companion she entered with. Her own death was moments away. Then Reina appeared, charging into the battlefield like a blazing comet. She saved the hero, but the cost was enormous. In the process, Reina lost her own blazing aura. Had that event never happened, Fina believed Reina would have eventually claimed a seat among the world's heroes. It was the first time Leo had heard the full story. Still, it matched everything his mother had ever said. She never regretted her choice, not once. Fina laughed warmly. That answer sounded exactly like the Reina she remembered. Changing topics, Leo asked why a legendary phoenix was hiding at Lumina Academy. Unfortunately, Fina couldn't answer. That information remained secret. Instead, she turned her attention toward Leo. Why was a young knight wandering the island of Summon? When Leo explained that he was studying summoning, Fina took a closer look, and then she froze. The aura inside him was absurd, dense, ancient, far beyond what should exist within a 15-year-old boy. For a brief moment, he didn't look like a child at all. The phoenix burst into laughter. Fate truly worked in mysterious ways. At long last, an opportunity had appeared. A chance to repay the debt she owed to Reina Zeringer. Fina gently urged Leo to extend his hand and accept her flame. The fire drifted toward his palm, dancing across his skin before slowly condensing into the shape of an egg. Inside rested the offspring of a phoenix. The legendary summon explained her wish. One day, when Leo became a true summoner worthy of standing among legends, she hoped he would form a contract with her child. Technically, the egg had been intended for another summoner, but Fina had made up her mind. She wanted Leo. Naturally, Leo asked the obvious question. Why wait? If the egg was here now, couldn't he hatch and tame it immediately? The moment those words left his mouth, Fina nearly collapsed from shock. Before she could stop him, flames had already begun gathering around his body. Alarm flashed across her face. This wasn't something a novice should even attempt. If the process failed, death was a very real possibility. But Leo had already crossed the point of no return. As the hatching ritual began, the outside world faded away. For a brief moment, nothing existed except Leo and the fire within the egg. The blaze was beautiful, hypnotic. Unable to resist, he reached out toward it. The instant his fingers touched the flame, everything changed. The tiny spark erupted into a raging inferno. Leo instinctively pulled back. The heat was unbearable. Breathing became difficult. Every instinct screamed at him to run. This was the true nature of Phoenix fire. Then realization struck. Perhaps this trial existed for a reason. Perhaps it was meant to show him the burden carried by the mythical birds themselves. A phoenix generated those flames by continuously burning its own body. Every day, every moment. Their flesh was constantly consumed and regenerated. An endless cycle of agony and rebirth. A pain few beings could ever comprehend. For the first time, Leo understood even a fraction of that suffering. And so he stopped resisting. Instead of fighting the fire, he embraced it. He accepted the pain, accepted the flames, accepted the burden. The inferno swallowed him completely. The blaze surged through his body and reached its peak, then suddenly cracked. The egg began to break. Leo opened his eyes. Something inside him had changed. A new understanding, a new acceptance. The agony had left its mark upon his soul. The flames that had consumed him slowly gathered around the egg. The hatching accelerated. Fina watched nervously. Then she asked the question, had he succeeded? Leo answered without hesitation. Yes. The phoenix stared for a moment before laughing in disbelief. What he had just accomplished was completely insane, even by her standard. At that moment, she genuinely believed he might one day become the greatest summoner in the world. Before the hatching was even finished, she was already congratulating him on the successful contract. The eggshell finally burned away. From the ashes emerged a tiny red chick, Fiora, the newborn phoenix. Fina was so excited that she immediately transformed into her human form. With complete trust, she entrusted her child to Leo. Ironically, the legendary offspring of one of the three great summons looked less like a divine beast and more like an adorable little chicken. An extremely cute little chicken. By midday, most students had already returned to the beach. The majority came back with relatively harmless summons found near the outskirts of the forest. With only 5 minutes left, Miss Yura glanced toward Carlo and asked how much time remained. Anyone who hadn't returned would soon fail. As expected, only 4 students remained inside the forest. the same 4 individuals who had caught Yura's attention from the very beginning. Then the ground started shaking. A giant bear burst from the forest, smashing through trees as it charged toward the beach. Riding atop the massive creature was Zia, covered in dirt and looking slightly rough. Around the edges, she probably arrived on the back of an aqua bear cub she had successfully tamed. For a prospective knight, that was an impressive accomplishment. Unfortunately, her grand entrance didn't remain the center of attention for long. A massive shadow passed overhead. Students looked up. One of the quiet boys descended from the sky while holding onto the talon of a shadow crow. The summon alone was enough to shock everyone. Even prestigious summoner families would struggle to tame such a creature. Although he hadn't completed a contract yet, simply subduing it already exceeded expectation. Miss Yura considered the result more than satisfactory. Moments later, another commotion erupted. A flawless white serpent slithered out of the forest. Riding atop it like a queen was Eliza. With obvious pride, she revealed that she had contracted a gorgon snake simply because her family didn't already possess one. In other words, she had expanded the family collection. At that point, Carlo officially called time. The examination was over. Just as the announcement echoed across the beach, the final student emerged, Leo. Compared to everyone else's dramatic entrances, his arrival couldn't have been more casual. He simply walked out of the forest. No giant beast, no legendary display, just a tiny chick resting comfortably on his head. While the others inspired awe and intimidation, Leo radiated pure cuteness. Naturally, some of his less intelligent classmates burst into laughter. They assumed he had failed. Apparently, his summon looked more like a farm animal than a magical beast. The mockery spread quickly. Miss Yura wasn't laughing, not even close. A chill ran down her spine because unlike the others, she knew exactly what she was looking at. This lunatic had somehow brought back a phoenix. For the first exam, a phoenix. By sunset, the summoning class officially concluded, and the students returned to the academy. For most of them, the day was over. Not for Leo. He still had unfinished business. After straightening his tie, he made his way to a certain office and knocked on the door. A pleasant voice invited him inside. The moment he entered, he found Professor Yura dressed casually beneath the warm glow of the setting sun. She immediately set her work aside and welcomed him. Taking a seat, Leo listened as she confessed something surprising. Today had been the first time in her entire life that she had seen a baby phoenix. In fact, she hadn't even known a mystical summon was hiding on Summoner Island. What Leo had accomplished wasn't merely impressive, it was unprecedented. No freshman in Lumina Academy's history had ever formed a contract with a phoenix. Not once. As she spoke, Yura gradually moved closer, then even closer. Eventually, she had Leo completely cornered. A serious expression settled on her face. She claimed she knew exactly what he really was. Leo swallowed nervously. For a second, he genuinely wondered whether he had somehow exposed his true identity. Then Yura pulled him into a tight embrace. Her conclusion couldn't have been further from the truth. In her eyes, he wasn't a reincarnated hero. He was an unprecedented summoning genius unlike anything the Academy had ever seen. Although she wanted to celebrate his achievement publicly, she believed secrecy was the smarter option. News of a freshman contracting a phoenix would spread like wildfire. The attention alone would become unbearable. For now, she wanted that information hidden. There was only one thing she demanded in return. When the exploratory class ended, Leo had to choose summoning as one of his primary majors. As far as Yura was concerned, he possessed all the potential necessary to become a summoning hero remembered for generations. And that is where we are going to leave things for now. If you enjoyed this recap, drop a like and subscribe, so you do not miss what happens next. See you in the next one.